Hey everyone, Sean Cecil here. Today I wanted to share a walkthrough of a document I created called A Map Out of Burnout, How to Find Your Calling. And this is something that I created just because, over the course of my time doing career coaching work and helping people find careers that are both financially lucrative and also, personally fulfilling, I've spoken to many, many people about this, and I've observed that far too many people are stuck in careers that may bring them good money, but don't bring them a good life. I know that was the case for me. I worked as a high flying strategy consultant at the Boston Consulting Group, and I worked as a financial quant. So like I've done that whole thing. But I wouldn't limit this to professionals who are working for a company and earning a good salary and all that kind of stuff. I would also include many entrepreneurs. So nowadays I live in Austin, Texas, obviously a very entrepreneurial city. And I've met many entrepreneurs who have traded their golden handcuffs for platinum handcuffs. And don't get me wrong, I love entrepreneurship. It's one of the things I love about living here. But in many cases, they're in a position where even though they've taken a major step forward, their business is running them rather than them running the business. Right. So there's, they're making more money than, very often than somebody who would be working in a company. They may be making millions of dollars a year. But even though they're making more money, they still don't have that sense of fulfillment. They still don't have that sense of purpose. So the handcuffs may be shinier, but they're still handcuffs. And so I want to help those people as well. And so this guide is for both types of people, because in either case, that kind of stress ripples outwards to other areas of your life. It ripples outwards into your health. When people are stressed, they sleep less well, and then that combined with chronically elevated cortisol levels makes it hard to lose weight, makes it hard to maintain a healthy body composition. Affects memory, affects focus, all kinds of other things that go into this mental health. I could go for an hour about the positive effects of healthy sleeping and healthy cortisol levels. It also, if you look at like people's habits, right, when it comes to health, if people feel exhausted all the time, they're more likely to skip their workouts. If people are stressed, they're more likely to cope by consuming things that they maybe shouldn't consume. Sugar and alcohol being some of the ones that pop to mind immediately. That stress also affects people's interactions with other people in their lives, right? It affects, people are less likely to engage socially. They're more likely to have interpersonal conflicts, especially with their partner or their spouse. Children are very emotionally sensitive, a lot more than most adults realize, and they're very tuned to these subtle cues from their caregivers, and they pick up on these kind of stress situations. Like you can't hide it from them, and it spooks them, right? And a lot of children acting out can often be tied to that. And then at a deeper, more fundamental level, if you're spending most of your waking hours doing something that you don't enjoy, it saps the aliveness from living. And I don't want anybody to have to live that way, right? Because I know what that's like. I have lived that way, and I want to show you guys a better way. So let's dive in and let's kind of understand the root problem. So let's start off with the real reason most people are exhausted. So most people think they're exhausted because they have too much to do. I have found that this is almost never the case. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are exceptions. As I said, I've been in positions where I had to work 100-hour weeks for due diligence or for something else. And like, yes, that is exhausting. And there is no way around that. 100 hours a week is gonna wear you down. Most people aren't doing that. Most people, they think that they're exhausted because of some combination of being too many tasks, or the tasks being too tiring or intense or whatever. But in reality, what's draining is not the nature of the tasks themselves. It's the resistance to the situation. So one of the most exhausting things that a human can experience is to be in a situation where they're thinking, I don't want to be here. Being present creates energy. right? Like if you think about like you're a kid and it's Christmas morning, like you've got all the energy in the world, right? If you think of time, when you're doing something you love, right? Like, whatever that may be, maybe it's a hobby you love or spending time with people you love, it's like you can go forever. The opposite situation is equally draining. And so we can call this the grind. So the grind is where you're doing something that you don't want to do, and you don't have anything that you're moving forward to. You don't have anything to look ahead to. It's just moving away from some sort of poverty or lack. So, most of the time when people are in the grind, it's because of finances. It's because they're moving away from the fear of not having enough money. Sometimes it may be the fear of not being successful or not being worthy or not being good enough or something like that. But it's a moving away from pain kind of thing. So there are two alternatives to the grind. The first is called the hustle. So the hustle, the big difference here is now instead of moving away from something, you're moving towards something. One caveat here, like hustle is a word that like a lot of entrepreneurs like to use. Like, oh yeah, man, I'm hustling, I'm making money. But in many cases, those people are still actually moving away from some form of poverty or lack. Like you can even have very successful entrepreneurs who are moving away from not having enough money because the definition of enough money changes, or because they're still anchored in a past childhood where maybe there were money problems, or because they have their sense of status tied to their role as the owner of the company and the success of the company, and they're still running away from stuff. And in that case, I would actually say that's actually still the grind. It may be a better grind, but it's still the grind. Um, for me, the way I'm defining hustle here is that you're moving towards something that is personally meaningful to you, and almost always for reasons that go beyond money. Now, the second alternative to the grind is flow. So, people have talked about flow state. There's a book by, and I may mispronounce this, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. Don't ask me to spell that. Just Google book about flow state, and it should come up. It's the most famous book on the topic. But when you're in flow, there's no moving away or moving towards, right? You're not running from anything, and you're not trying to move towards anything. You're just alive in the present because you're doing what you love and it's fulfilling for its own sake. Now, there are many people out there who I would characterize as charlatans because they're making promises that they cannot keep, who are selling that they can take you straight from grind to flow overnight without the hard work of the hustle in between. I have literally never seen that happen, and I've been in this game for a while. So, unless somebody's got some secret magic that the rest of us just don't know about, in reality, a calling takes time to build. Very often that can be 3 to 5 years, right? Especially if your goal is to do so in a financially sustainable way, which I would recommend, right? Like you can structure all of this so that it's a, gradual or intentional transition rather than like a chaotic upheaval, which, obviously comes with a lot of costs, especially if you have a family. So the order of this then becomes, you start at the grind because that's kind of the societal default. Then you move into the hustle, right? And you're in the hustle when you figured out your calling and you have a plan to get there, because now you're moving towards something, right? Like, I had a client recently who, she's a dentist, and she's really had this like, I just don't want to do this for the next 20 or 30 years kind of thing. And so now that we have clarity on what she does want to do, which is, in the creative space, and on a path for her to eventually transition into that, now the toxicity of like, I'm stuck here forever is gone, right? So now the grind is gone, and now she's in the hustle. Now there's forward activity. And that doesn't mean that she's like immediately quit a job. No, because, it's an important bridge situation. But now she has direction, and she has hope, and she has vision. And that provides a lot of energy. And then finally, once you are in flow, once you've put in the work and you've built something that aligns with your essence, now you can be in that state of where, like Alan Watts would say, you're getting paid to play, right? And that's where you ultimately want to be. So that's the order of how you do this. Okay, so now the next question I'm sure people are going to be asking is like, well, what does a flow type career really look like? I mean, sounds like, kind of fuzzy, vague, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's dive in. Let's get specific. Let's look at some details of what a flow type career really looks like. And the Japanese actually have this great concept called the ikigai. And I like to use this as kind of a roadmap, how you get out of the rat race and how you get into fulfillment and prosperity, because it's a very powerful tool when used correctly. So what is ikigai? So ikigai is a Japanese word, and it's referring to a career that meets 4 separate criteria. So the first is that you can make good money. The second is that you have the skills to be successful. The third is that somehow you are meeting the needs of other humans. You're adding value to the world. And the fourth is that you enjoy doing it. So we can break these down into what you can be paid for, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you love. And you want to be doing something that has all 4 of those things. If you have all 4 of those things, just imagine a situation right now where you're in a career where you have all 4 of those things. You're making great money, doing what you love, you're having a positive impact, and you're good at it. How could you not be energized in that situation? So we can take a look here that we have this diagram below, right? So here we have ikigai right here. And you can see, what you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, what you're good at. You can see these little 4 intersections where you've got 2 of them, these little intersections where you've got 3 out of the 4, and then right in the middle where they all overlap, that's the ikigai. Now, the challenge is that it's very rare that a fully formed ikigai career just pops up right in front of you. It's not like something that you find on your way to work. It's not something that you happen to notice behind the eggs in the fridge. You have to very intentionally craft it and create it. So how do we actually get from this confusion of this societal model that doesn't work for the vast majority of people to ikigai? So first of all, let's look at what you don't do. Let's take a look at some of the pitfalls, because the truth is that, as I said, the societal model just doesn't work. I've seen a statistic that 85% of people don't enjoy what they do for work. And of the 15% who do, that's not including the people who aren't going to be enjoying it 12 to 18 months from now, because there's some people who are enjoying something temporarily because they're still on kind of like the honeymoon period. So then if you take those people, right, like it's even lower. So you're really looking at like single-digit percentages of people who actually enjoy their work. And if that's the outcome of the processes that people use, then clearly the processes are broken. So let's take a look at the broken processes so we can avoid that. So the biggest one that most people start with is the biggest pitfall that number one is that people start with what you can be paid for. So if you see up here, they start down at the bottom. And that primary focus on money is so deeply ingrained in our society that it's challenging for most people to even conceive of a different approach. Like even thinking of doing anything other than focusing on money is just viewed as like reckless. Because most people don't even believe that you can even have an ikigai type career. Like they don't see people doing it. It's not common in our society. So it's not something that people can even wrap their minds around as like, oh, I know somebody who does that. So yes, I can do it like that. Now, in reality, you can absolutely have an ikigai type career. And it doesn't mean that you have to be broke. It does mean that you have to do stuff that very few people do, but we'll get to that in a second. So there are a couple problems with the focusing on money approach. The first is that it doesn't take any account of your natural drives or values or any of that. So over time, that gap creates more and more and more stress. And as I said earlier, that leads to arguments with people in your life. It leads to self-medication with substances. It leads to chaos in your business. And I assure you it will, because your business is a mirror of you if you're an entrepreneur. Many people, what they do is they plan to figure out what they truly want and do that like after they've made enough money to support themselves indefinitely, right? So basically it's like, oh, I'll retire and then I'll figure out what I want to do. But that means 20 to 40 years of kind of slogging through the muck and dealing with the side effects. And, you've only got so many decades on this planet, right? Eight to 10 decades on this planet. I personally would not want to spend 2 to 4 of them in a state of constant resistance. This is just, I don't think that's a good approach. Now, if you're early in your career and you've got to, build your initial financial security and your skill set and your ability to earn money, yeah, absolutely, that makes sense, right? Like, there's a time to do that, especially in your, your 20s and all that. I'm not advocating that people who are, struggling to hold down a job or making minimum wage or anything, like suddenly jump into this process. Like, do build some degree of financial security for yourself, but don't wait until retirement. Like, there's a happy medium in the middle of when it makes sense to really start saying, okay, great, I'm going to move beyond a basic sense of financial security and move into actually crafting something that I'm really going to enjoy. The second big pitfall with the chasing money approach is, like, once you started climbing the wrong career ladder, the longer you're on it, the harder and harder it gets to switch over, right? So you've got to catch up on skills, network, brand yourself, accumulate it, like all of these other things. These all build and compound over time. So the earlier that you get started, the better, right? I mean, even if you're 25, right, which is when the brain really reaches the completion of its development, that is a great time to start at least building the self-awareness that is going to be fundamental to helping you get this kind of clarity on the career that's going to work for you. Okay, pitfall number 2. This is the second big one that I see, is that many people will start from trying to find what they're good at as the first thing that they start to do to try to find their ikigai. And I found 3 problems with this approach. One is that humans are capable of becoming good at many, many, many things, right? So most people, just because you're not good at something now doesn't mean that you won't be good at it if you put in the time and effort. This is growth mindset, and there's a lot of work by Dr. Carol Dweck on this concept and the value of growth mindset. But your abilities are not fixed, right? There are very few situations where you have to have tremendous innate talent to become an expert. Obviously, if you're talking about an Olympic gold medal or something like that, that's a very edge case situation. But in reality, like, that's just so far from most people's experience. Most careers require a mix of a wide range of skills, and you can build that talent in, like, I mean, if you look at like what I do is coaching, right? There are a lot of skills ranging from psychology to marketing to communication with clients to demonstrating authority, but like all of these other skills, they're all different things to learn, right? And some of them, we'll get into the different types of skills that are important, but if you put in the time and the focused effort, you can build those skills. The second problem with, trying to start with finding what you're good at is that even with very, very exceptional innate talent, that talent isn't going to reveal itself without putting in the effort of practice. Right? Like, Michael Jordan failed to get on his high school basketball team in his sophomore year. That doesn't mean Michael Jordan sucks at basketball. What that means is that he had not yet put in enough practice to reveal what he was truly capable of. So if he had just focused on what am I good at and gone in with that fixed mindset, without the belief in his ability to improve, then we wouldn't have the legend of Michael Jordan that we have today. And then finally, and this is probably the most important issue with starting with what you're good at, is I found that the people who choose to focus here first are almost always seeking external validation of their competence in order to deal with deep issues of doubt around their own self-worth and self-efficacy. They're trying to find wholeness in other people needing them or praising them, but you can't get that sense of wholeness filled externally. It may seem like you can, and it may temporarily feel a little bit good, but in the long run, the only way to have a sense of personal power and self-worth and self-esteem that's durable, that lasts, is to have it come from within, right? That there is no way around that. And so that's the kind of thing, we're going to talk a little bit later in this guide about deconditioning. That's the kind of thing that you really want to address through the internal work, through the deconditioning process, rather than trying to use an external Band-Aid. Okay, so if we're not going to start with, what you can get paid for, and we're not going to start with what you're good at, then what that leaves is what the world needs and what you love. Now, there's more than 8 billion people on this planet, and each one of them has many different needs. So there's almost an infinite number of possible human needs. And so given that, I found that it makes the most sense to start with finding out what you love. So once you've figured out what really you enjoy and what brings you happiness and contentment and fulfillment, now you go to what the world needs. So yes, we want to build wealth, but the key to building wealth is delivering value to other human beings, right? If you're doing it in any kind of ethical way, which is the only way that I'm going to recommend or sanction or work with, then you have to have voluntary exchange where people believe that they are getting more value than they're paying, right? So that only works if you have a foundation of providing value and serving your fellow man in some way or fellow woman in some way. So what you want to do is you have to find a way to turn what you love into something that other people value. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to monetize that value. And fundamentally, the frame you want to have here is you want to go from being a consumer to being a creator. So, for example, I once had someone tell me, "Oh, well, I really enjoy watching TMZ." Okay, well, that's a consumer activity that doesn't add value to anybody else. Now, if you want to add value to somebody else, maybe you go and if you really, really are interested in that stuff, you look into being an entertainment reporter or something along those lines where you're at least creating something for somebody else that they can use to add value in their lives. But there's this very, very big fundamental mind shift that comes where you move from being a consumer to being a creator, and that's really key here. So, think about it in those terms. Have something that I love. How can I use this in a way that I can create something for the world? And now we finally get to the money component that everybody's so obsessed with. So if you've built a strong foundation of value, then all you have to do is you just have to apply business principles to monetize that value. And that may be working for somebody else. That may be in your own business. But if you are creating value, then you can persuade people to pay you for that value. And then from there, it's just a matter of building the skills needed to make that new path work. So if you want to make the Ikigai work, right, the optimal order to go in is what you love, then what the world needs, then what you can be paid for, and then what you're good at. So if you want a tip of how to remember that, come up here to our little picture of the Ikigai. You start at the top with what you love, and then you just go clockwise, right? Super easy to remember. Start at the top, go clockwise. Okay, so finally, I'm going to dive into a little bit more detail for each of these 4 steps, just so I can give you guys some more of the how-to on how to do this. Now, obviously, all of these steps is going to require, a significant amount of depth to them, and it's more than we can go into in a single video today. But I really do want to make sure that you guys at least understand another level of this so that you can really start to go and apply it in your lives. So when it comes to finding what you love, there are 2 key inputs that I found are really important. One of them is pretty easy to get, and the other one is going to require some work. So the easy part is getting your psychometrics. So psychometrics are psychological tests that address natural behavioral modalities. And some of them are to some extent based in neurochemistry. So there's some durability there. Personally, I like the DISC and motivators assessments. And so you can go and you can get them at this link. I don't make any profit from this, but I just think it's a really valuable test. So I sell it to you at the same price that it gets sold to me at. And over time, I'm going to create some more resources on this so that you guys can learn how to interpret that better than just the computer printout. So the psychometrics are easy. The hard input to get, though, is your authentic values. So I've seen many people in the personal development world who will have people create a totem pole of values or do some kind of values work. You'll see it in neuro-linguistic programming. You'll see it in other domains. The problem is that while it's relatively easy to build a totem pole of values, the vast majority of totem poles of values are going to be contaminated with 2 things that aren't actually helpful. One is quote unquote values that are based in fear. And the other is stuff that was installed from other people that isn't actually from your authentic self. It's something that you believe you should value, right, at some level, and this can be very deeply unconscious if you haven't done a lot of digging on it. And so, in order to get an authentic totem pole of values, the only way I've seen that's actually successful on this is to do a lot of what I call deconditioning work. So deconditioning work is going in and deprogramming a lot of stuff that accumulates, because there's so much unconscious programming from society and from experiences in our lives that accumulates over time. Deconditioning is going in and actually clearing all of that out, or at least bringing it into awareness and deciding what you want to keep and what you want to discard. It's like if you have a computer, and it's got a bunch of malware and 78 tabs open and 3 movies playing, right? It's closing out of the tabs that you don't want. It's clearing the malware. It's doing all that kind of stuff. And if you're willing to put in the work on this, right? And even the most efficient deconditioning systems is 3 to 6 months of dedicated work. So it is a commitment, but it is, in my experience, it is the key to lifetime fulfillment. It is the most valuable thing that I have ever done in my entire life. And the fact that so few people, I said many here, let me correct this. The fact that so few people actually do deconditioning work, or even know that deconditioning exists, is why so many people are always chasing and are never truly content. Okay, so now once you figure out what you love, now we've got to match that to what the world needs. So you've got your psychometrics, you've got your authentic values. Now we want to figure out how can this be expressed in a way that creates value for other human beings. And so this is going to require some creativity, and it's going to require some divergent thinking. And I recommend a process that was key to the success of somebody named Walt Disney, who I'm sure many of you have heard of. He's one of the most successful creatives in all of history. And the process is called the dreamer, the planner, and the critic. It has 3 steps. So the first one is the dreamer. You're brainstorming with complete freedom. There's no limitations, there's no constraints, there's no concerns about what will or won't work. You don't discard anything. Anything that comes up goes on the thing. You don't go, oh, well, no, that one would. No, none of that. Everything goes down. Then we move to stage 2, which is the planner. And we add in a bit of realism. So the question that we're really asking here is, as we're going through this list of everything that's possible, how exactly could this be executed? So the dreamer is optimistic. Just everything's possible. Literally everything is possible for the dreamer. For the planner is a lot more neutral. So the planner is not pessimistic, right? There's no judgment here. Again, we're still not looking for why this won't work. What we're looking is, how could this work? And it may be that in asking the question of how could this work, we don't come up with anything and we do discard some stuff. But we're not coming at it from the place of why won't this work? We're coming at it from the place of why this will work, in the expectation that it will. So the starting premise is that things are good. And then we may find out that, we just can't find a way to put the pieces together, and that's fine. And then finally, we come in with, the quote unquote, the pessimist, which is the critic phase. So the critic comes in here to look at the challenges and look at the things that haven't been considered and the stuff that will get in the way. But I want to be very clear here that this is a constructive critic. So the goal here is to improve things by spotting chinks in the armor and mending them. It is not to burn everything to the ground. There's no bullying or harshness in this phase with the critic. So if you see a situation where either the critic phase is really harsh, or the critic is coming into the dreamer or the planner phases, then that's a sign of an internal program where you have an inner bully or an inner judge that's there. And that's one of the reasons why the deconditioning work is so important, is to go actually remove that, so that you actually can be in optimistic and neutral states, rather than just, always finding everything that's wrong with everything. Step 3 here. So now we're talking about how to get paid for what you love and what the world needs. So now we have a situation where you're adding meaningful value to the lives of others. Now it's time to monetize that value. So very often that will show up as business planning. Sometimes it will show up as seeking employment, in which case, it's a question of how do you persuade somebody to hire you versus if you're running a business, how do you persuade customers to pay you? If you are doing business planning, it is essential that you actually write out a solid, complete, comprehensive business plan. This is not a business pitch. This is not the thing that you see on Shark Tank that is presented to investors. A business plan is just for you. It is an internal document that details all of the important things. Like, what's the structure of your offer? What's the price? How are you going to market it? What do you expect your cost per client acquisition to be? Looking at competition, looking at operations, looking at financials, looking at risks, like putting together a really solid business plan. And you want to have a solid template, and ideally you want to run this by somebody who has some success as a business owner to get feedback. And then finally, we come to the last portion, which is building the necessary skills. So there are two types of skills that have to be built. So the first skill is to develop mastery in your chosen career path, right? Like in actually doing the things that are delivering value. And the second is to build the skill of persuasion that will be necessary to actually monetize the value you're creating. And you may very well need to find or hire mentors in either area or both, and even potentially multiple mentors in multiple areas. So for example, in coaching, I hired somebody to help teach me neurolinguistic programming and timeline therapy, right? I had built some skill sets from other work. I've gone through lots of resources, but I have in many cases gone and invested a significant amount of money and time and effort in order to make myself an even better coach, to hold myself to an even higher standard so that I can deliver even more value, because I take mastery of my craft very seriously. On the other hand, I've also hired multiple business coaches for things like paid ads, for things like organic content and branding and all those other things, because that is me learning the skill of persuasion, right? So you have these two different verticals here, right? One is actually doing the thing, and the other is persuading people to buy the thing. And this is something where, again, it makes sense to make that investment if it's something that you really believe in, that you're going to be doing for decades. Then yeah, like you're going to get that positive ROI. Okay, so I know that we've been through a lot today, so there you have it, everyone. It is very much possible to have it all. We talked about the root challenges of what it's like when you are not in alignment. We talked about the process of going from grind to hustle to flow. We talked about the ikigai and some of the pitfalls that people fall into. We talked about the right order to do it, and we talked about what it actually entails to do each of the 4 steps of crafting an ikigai type career. And yes, it requires commitment, it requires creativity, it requires understanding many different dynamics. And because this combination is so rare, the outcome of people living in ikigai is rare. And so many people believe that it doesn't exist, or that it's like some random blessing, because they don't see it as a common thing in their day-to-day life, because school doesn't teach us any of this, right? Our parents don't teach us any of this, and I'm not blaming any of them. They don't know either. It's just it's something that most people haven't really thought about. It's something that our society just, until very recently, wasn't at the point where people really could, and so now that we're in this age of abundance, and we're in this age of information, and we're in this age where this is now all becoming possible, these new opportunities and these skill sets are now available to people. And so I would just I would urge people that to consider the possibilities, right, that are here, and to recognize that the reason many people haven't done it is just because the new way just hasn't become common yet, but it will. Especially, I'm very optimistic about biotech, and as lifespans are extended, I think people are going to put a lot more effort into making sure that those years are happy, and those years are fulfilling, and those years are doing something that they're really connected to. So I really do believe that this is the way of the future. And to get there, right, it's not a random crapshoot. It is, what I have described here in this document is a reliable, repeatable process that has been very clearly outlined. And obviously, there's a lot more depth to many different stages of this process. And if you're interested in that, I would love for you to connect with me. So I have some links here for you to reach out and message me, and I'm happy to give you some clarity on what the next steps are for your position and give you some more details. And I'll be making more content on all of this, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future. And I really hope that this provides some value. I really hope that you can go forth and you can live your ikigai and you can wake up excited about what you do, and that can ripple out into positive health benefits and positive relationships and all of these other things. I want all of that for you. So have a wonderful day, everyone, and I will see you on the next video.